Senate Appropriations again after a short break, and we're taking up the House not passed, but out of the House Appropriations Committee, their proposed budget for 2023. And so Stephanie is going to run this through and has two summary documents.
So yeah,
hopefully everybody has.
Yeah. They're kind of dense, but they're the documents that basically the House has been working with as they went through markup, sort of cleaned up for their final version that they voted yesterday. So I'm going to start with the long one, with the most stuff on the page, and it flips over. And I'm not going to go through every single line. I've highlighted green mainly to give you a sense of the main construct of the money. And I'll just preface this with this year, there's so many pieces of fiscal and appropriations in the air between ARPA and other bills. This particular sheet only focuses on the general fund. The next sheet will focus on ARPA and general fund, and then obviously anything that's related to other funds is all incorporated into the bill and in the web report. But the main sort of action is in the general fund and ARPA area. And so this is set up as the base. This sheet that we're looking at right now, the long sheet, is the base of the general fund. And it's a comparative of what the governor put on the table versus where the House is landing. The middle column is where the House is landing. The column on the far right is the difference. So if there's a 0 in the far right, it means the House didn't do anything different from the governor. And so the top part of the sheet, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. I'm just going to point to the line under line 15. That is the net total revenue changes. The governor had proposed 49.5. The House, which includes the bill they passed last year with property tax surcharge revenue 2.8, would be at $46.7 million down off of revenue. So that's a $2.8 million difference, mostly in that bill from last year.
So that's savings, or
so they had more. So that because the negative is smaller in the House had $2.8 million more of capacity in the general fund to use.
They didn't reduce revenues as much as the government proposed.
There's no savings in any of it. It's all a loss to us.
Yeah, the 2.8 is just
A little less loss than the.
A little less of loss, right?
There is the next section down is transfers. The header says structural deficits, but those have sort of moved out of this section. And the governor, when he constructed his bill before the budget adjustment passed, he had $77 million coming forward from this year to next year to use those. That's one-time money. When you passed the budget with BAA, you brought $86 million forward. So that was more capacity. The House in line 16, this is the first reading out thing. They are making changes around the property transfer tax. They're still notwithstanding the formula. They're just letting more money flow. We talked a little bit about planning money, $1.6 million of planning money flowing, and a little bit more on municipal, and $10 million more flowing from the HCB. So that negative $11 million is the combination of all the pieces. And so the governor's budget had not withstood the formula and basically made a few changes on the municipal planning side, a little change on the tax side. The House is doing a significant change, still notwithstanding. The formula is not running. It's just less money. It's flowing.
We are notwithstanding.
How long have we done it?
No. How much is the not withstood amount?
Oh,
it's 915.
No, it's much larger now because the property transfer tax is higher. It's like 35, 30. The property transfer tax forecast is like $74 million. I was just in it yesterday. I'm sorry.
I guess I'm way back years ago.
Yeah, when it was a much lower number annually, but we've had very robust, to the extent that we have, supply for we've had robust real estate exchanges.
But of course, in the last 2 years, we've more than made it up with all the CRF and the ARPA money into housing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that is a choice you're making. It's carried on the base picture here. Whether or not it remains base is going to be a question, next year or the year or two out, where the revenues are. If these.
So what they're doing is reducing the amount of not withstood.
Yeah.
on to VHCD and lowered it by 10 million.
Yeah.
And that's base ongoing.
Yeah, so as you can see it up at the top, in the very box at the top, it's $35 million. Now the House would only have $25 million coming in additional money, $24 million coming.
Where is that?
So it says PPT redirect.
Yeah.
So that's the amount of money that would have gone to other entities under the formula, but is instead coming to the general fund.
Got it.
And the House, with their action down on line 16, that 35, we didn't change it at the top because we started with it, and these are sort of the baseline revenues, but now dropped to 24. We could have carried it up there instead of a new line.
Got it.
And maybe I'll move that for the next version of this.
How much ARPA money and other sources have been given VHCP in the last?
We have it tallied. It's not on the sheet I have today, but I'll get it for you.
So, you know, it would be helpful for me
Between the BAA, 315, and it's a mix of ARPA and general
to
fund.
kind of get a netting out of where it all is, because you know, for me, I can't just look at this and say, this is what they're getting, because
Yeah,
I
this
don't
is
know
just,
what the
this
bottom
is just
is.
for this year. This is one, it doesn't continue.
I
But we
get it.
have the details of everything since the pandemic for all the sources of funds.
Yeah, because it's hard for me, because it's no, it hasn't been one source, it's come from all over the place.
So
So,
this is just as dealing with the transfer of the property tax. Okay.
and that brings you down to the yellow line, which is the available revenues of the general fund. And so they're basically the same, because the increase that, in terms of carry forward from the previous year, is mostly offset by that change in the property transfer tax, and also the changes that are in the other house, the $2.8 million. And then this, going down, this should say base appropriations on the left. But these are the base appropriations of the general fund. And so Pay Act is a base appropriation, and the majority of the budget in the general fund are, you know, the standard, you know, the baseline of folks. That's all in that $1.8 billion, along with, you know, normal inflationary pressures. And then everything else below is sort of an incremental initiative or change above or below that.
Okay.
So
So
basically how we show this here. So it starts with the initiatives the governor put on the table, and then it gets added to by the initiatives that the House is doing in response to the governor's, or in some cases they are included in something that might be buried in that 1.8 is now being pulled out in a line item.
So, for example, to help the budget work, we had moved engineering over to the capital bill. This would move engineering back to the general fund.
Yes.
The governor proposed it at 3.8, the House is concurring, so there's no
Exactly.
change.
Yeah.
The same is true for treasurers,
So the treasurer, when she was in, she had some position requests.
you know.
53,000 of that position request is in the general fund, the rest was on special fund and retirement funds. So it's the new position for retirement, the principal assistant, and then it's converted position.
So did they get, she came in, are these all the positions she requested or only a
It's all,
portion?
so 53, they did all three of them, and so when you look at the web report, you'll see that this is over $200,000 for these three positions.
So they funded all her requested ones.
But the cost of the general fund is 53,000.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
I see Vermont State College's 5 million that the House put in and the governor didn't have. Then down below, VSC, is that still Vermont State College?
It is, so they agreed with it, so where it says BSC, where the 5 million they agreed to. I don't know why they did it on 2 lines, I'll change that one too, it should say 10, they did 10 in the base. I
Okay,
think because they were, the nature of the way the House committee works, they like to see every little increment. But that actually could go onto 1 line, and then it would be a $5 million.
so they're trying to represent that they agreed with the 5 million of the governor, but they also.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that should be.
Yeah,
So
So it-
does that mean in the plan, what they are doing is jumping ahead a year
so on the
base?
base, they're jumping ahead a year, and then when we get to the one time, which is the smaller page, which, They did a little bit more, but they did not fund the entirety of the bridge funding that was requested by the
Which
state.
was 19.
So it was 19 if they didn't get money in the base, and it was 14.9. And they did 2.5 of one-time bridge money.
Okay, so.
So I was just gonna sort of skip through the green ones unless you wanna go one by one.
Yeah, I met with them.
Yeah, okay, because
Well, can you, were you going line by line? or-
yeah, why don't we go line by line and go through? So we've got a.
I do have a question about the JTOC transfer.
So that's on
They
the
didn't
line.
do it.
They did not do that. So the governor was eliminating the JTOC transfer entirely. And then he was utilizing the freed up capacity of that in terms of the transportation fund to fund the DMV modernization. And then he would have had that as ongoing base capacity in the transportation fund after FY '23.
The House did not agree.
They did
and
not
kept
agree.
the transfer, because it added more general fund pressure, because that money goes to public
Yeah.
safety.
And I think the concern, they recognize that there's still transportation fund pressure out there in FY '24. I think it ties into how people feel about that report on fees, and you'll see in their language when we go through that, they continue that effort to understand what the.
Just to give some idea, the estimate was we had a report on foregone fees, and I think it was about, I don't know, 15 million just for transportation alone. Because in 6 years, we haven't raised the fees for, to get your driver's license, your registration, or any of them. So there is pressure on them, plus the revenues into the T fund are soft. What's really kept it going is purchase and use have been strong, but so, did you have a question about that, Dick?
No, I just wanted
But it's one of the major pieces of capacity in the general fund by not doing that.
it
And they-
brings up 20 million more.
Yeah, I mean, they still face the problem of how you pay for the DMV system, and so that played into their, how they balance out ARPA. The next one down, you just heard, you talked about it already today, and that's the dispatch plan. There's $3 million built into the base of public safety that was for the community grants portion over 3 years. They pulled that out, and you'll see when we get to the one-time page, they combined that with the $8 million of one-time money and just reserve that pending something more.
But that's all one time.
The 3 million, the administration carried in base because they lodged it in the state police line, the public safety line. But the idea of it was this 3 million would be for grants over 3 years to the communities. So they have pulled it out and reserved the $11 million, whether or not there will be additional base pressure once you approve a plan. That's a bridge you'll have to cross in '24.
But that frees up 3 million of general
It
fund.
does.
Yeah, so, yeah, done, just have a bridge to cross in 24.
So the,
Gonna be a steep climb up over there.
Might have to put in a drawbridge just to get across, the boats can go underneath.
So Bobby, farm to school got 329.
they added that to the base in ag, and then they also brought the base for working lands up. The governor brought it up to $1 million at 406, and they brought it up to $2 million with the 1.406.
So 1.4 plus another million?
No, governor did 406. So the governor's 406 brought it up to $1 million, and they added $1 million.
Yeah.
They also pulled out, so the governor was.
No, they didn't. Let's see. The governor had 406.
Yeah, that brings working lands up to $1 million.
Right, and then they added another million?
Yep, and
So
so they
it's
brought
not-
working lands up to 2 million.
2
So
million.
the change you see is the million, but the underlying base.
Very successful.
Yeah, so in the House's world, working lands base would be $2 million for grants going forward. Right now, it's $596,000.
And they wanted only,
base.
but they wanted 15.
Million?
And 15, that's what, in the public hearing, that's what they came in and wanted 15 million. It's a huge increase. Okay.
Well, this is a pretty good.
Yes, it is.
100%.
Yeah, I'd say we probably,
I
okay,
see they got the healthcare advocate.
well, let's,
So the 911 board, the governor had fully pulled all the funding for that into the general fund. The House was not ready to make that change, so they are leaving the 911 funded by the Universal Service Fund, and they're making up the deficit in the one-time section. So
what is the deficit?
it's like 1.3 or so. Used to be just under $1 million, now it's a little bit over $1 million. in the Universal, so they're leaving the construct of the Universal Service Fund as is.
And then they're supplementing.
And supplementing with one time. So they did not address the structural nature of the deficit. They simply made up, plug some one-time folder. They made choices in some places to plug deficits for a year. In some places, they are letting deficits continue to ride forward.
So we're putting in more money for legal aid, healthcare advocate. Don't we have a letter from Eric Appleton about no increases for just the regular legal aid services?
I think we do.
I think we do. In this case, they only,
This is a position that they're funding.
Afterwards, they do a good job.
what the healthcare,
They agreed with the annual rate increases in DEVA, which are now pulled out in the budget. They agreed with the emergency department rate increase. You will see the language back in, that was in the budget adjustment.
yes, about making the emergency rooms more desirable for mental health.
They agreed with the postpartum coverage, funding that.
You'd almost have to call this a love fest.
And then.
You're sitting in the right seat. I'm surprised Alice doesn't get up and sanitize.
I'm on 32.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, gosh, we'll tell you about that later.
Yeah. What is SO?
Central office.
SO?
I don't know, it should be CO, that's probably a typo, kind of like advocate, it's hard to
Yeah.
type it in Excel sometimes. But line 32, this is the largest base investment that they're doing, and the governor had included in his budget a 3% increase for the designated agencies and home health systems, the community-based systems. This is the first time in a long time the governor's budget hasn't included that, but you know that you had a request for 10%. They are funding a total 7% increase, so that they're adding 4% to the governor's 3% to bring that total up to 7% as a rate increase across those providers.
So we've only got to do 3
So
and
that-
then get it to 10.
Yeah, but they didn't do that for other providers, did they?
No, they did.
And that 4% costs $9.3 million.
And the other providers that are in here are VAs, SSAs, and the long-term choices for care. That's what's here.
Yeah.
But recovery houses or any of the youth service
Yeah.
bureaus,
They didn't,
got nothing.
Yep, got nothing.
they didn't get anything?
So, we're gonna have to go back, because we're expanding, say, working lands by $1 million. We're gonna be having to make some choices here. Do you wanna add more money there, or do you wanna address some of the pressures on these community service organizations? And I think, Alice, you're talking about at a ski area, they're now paying $20 an hour. And,
Yep.
and start. And
Yeah.
the salaries can't be eat.
Base salary the adult days, the base salary is $13.
The,
Okay. That's it.
well, I just wanna understand where they did their increases, and where they did in the social services field.
So I guess.
We had the same debate during budget adjustment over the, recruitment and retention pay.
And whether the PNMI
Yeah.
facilities are in there.
So to the extent that the rate setting piece of PNMI would be in the budget, that would be buried up in that 1.8 billion. But on top of that,
Oh, so, it's 3 o'clock already. Is it 3?
Yes.
Oh, because we have Matt Valerio.
He's right here with us.
Oh, he's no longer in the waiting room.
Oh, there he is.
So I'm going to suggest that we stop here at the,
Back to the same time as we.
and come back, and so we're ending up on the 3% to 7%.
I think I'm gonna take this home. Are we
We are
coming
on
back this
line
tomorrow, maybe?
33.
Yes, we'll just, well,
I'll
let's
take
see.
this home with me then. I'll be remote tomorrow.
So this page is the base, and then it sort of shows you what's left over to do on one time, and then these go through both the ARPA and the general fund one time. The short page is not comparison to the governor, so I was just gonna highlight places where they did not do things for the governor as well. But
All right,
it gives you a flavor for the construct that they put together on the general fund.
all right. So we'll come back to, this is very helpful, Stephanie. Um, I'm gonna,
This is an extra meeting.
I want.
And here we are for Senator Nika. And,
On sports betting.
Yeah.
Matt, can you hear us okay in the room? You can? Okay, great. Thank you, just testing out.
I've got the language.
All right.
And, well, we just want to make it to Rutland, since he's saying something about,
And
well,
I'm
we
gonna
don't want to
switch
leave it up to
behind you.
immigration. On the other hand, we could put something in to start it,
Right.
and, you know, that they would have to come back, you know, for approval of something with joint fiscal. But I wanna
Get some money.
I wanna get some money.
It's too good.
Crazy,
It's probably more
more
than
like 10.
yeah,
Well, but
first year.
the first year that.
Oh, yeah. Just the Super Bowl alone was $500 million in the earth.
Well, I can spend it in the budget adjustment, I could probably only spend 2 a year. I'm not arguing against it, that's for sure.
No,
Great.
no, I wanna, so, just to let you know, that's my
I'm good.
situation. Well, I know you're good.
I'm good.
And it's happening. We can be curious about
I
it.
have no,
So I don't know how much you have to flesh it out or how much the Rock has got to do, but we could work it.
if you
so-
want to study.
No, I don't want to study it. I want to do what,
Why does it need a stone?
no, in terms of what we would do to,
So,
and do we leave it up to the administration, that kind of thing. So, but just to let you know, that's what I'm going to be suggesting we do behind the scenes.
And just so you know, we're still live.
all right.
Okay. So we are now moving on to the Office of the Attorney General, and we have Matt Valerio here to present their budget request for 2023. And that, of course, is Senator Sears' section of the budget. So he'll be looking at that in greater detail. So thank you, Matt, for being here. And we have a document, and then we also know that you felt that the governor's proposed budget did not fully fund what you believe should be funded, so we will have you address that as well.
Okay, you all set?
And so we're all set for you to start your presentation.
Okay, I'm Matt Valerio, I'm Defender General, and thank you for having me back. This is for my 22nd budget, and just to always give you the update that we did finish our last fiscal year, again, within budget, without budget adjustment, and anticipate that the same will happen this year. And as we have done for the last 21 budgets. So the governor's recommended budget proposed a 5.3% increase in general fund. That, and you should have a sheet that I sent over this morning, and I've also provided a little bit more detail notes to Senator Sears and to the chair previously regarding this. But basically what the governor's recommend did was deal with the salary and benefit increases that we would anticipate in our budget, dealt with the retirement issue, rate change, benefit changes, and the like, dealt with a 2% increase in our already negotiated 4-year contracts for our public defender contracts, and then dealt with some minor stuff for internal services. The governor also provided $300,000 for assigned counsel contractors, and unfortunately there was this left us with a big vacancy savings of over $400,000 if they're just trying to incorporate what was proposed. Now, I have to say that this year the budget is kind of an evolving situation. It is not one that is as easily predicted. And I wanted to talk about that, and the best context to talk about that are in the context of the needs remaining unfunded that I have put on the sheet before you. We are in the process of a system-wide reclassification of our bargaining unit positions. That is basically our what we have called support secretaries, administrative secretaries, case aides, and investigators. So everybody who is not a lawyer in the Defender General's office is part of a collective bargaining unit. And one of the things that we have found, and I've brought this up probably for the last 5 years, but this past year it's been extraordinarily acute, is our inability to hire people within the pay structure that we have. One of the things that I've talked to over the years, I talked to Suzanne Young about this issue, and one of the things that she had done, if you go back to her time as Deputy Attorney General, is the Attorney General's office had reclassified all of their similar staff from ours. They reclassified them from admin secretaries to legal assistant 1 or legal assistant 2, and the investigators, there's different pay grades of investigators. And for example, the investigators at the AG's office are pay grade 25, and ours were pay grade 20. And before the budget process started, we had individually been working on reclassification of these positions across the board, so we could put ourselves in a position to actually hire people. We have, in the last year, seen, as probably most businesses or organizations did, an exodus of people from the system, both attorneys and support staff. And then in attempting to hire people, we were not getting people who frankly had the skills to do the work that is necessary. It's a two or three issue problem. One of the big issues is the nature of the work of these support personnel in the Defender General's office is significantly different now than it was 5 years ago. I will say that the people we need now have to have a significant facility with technology. They have to be able to deal with the court's Odyssey filing and case management system, which is no easy task. They have to be able to deal with using things like Zoom and Teams and WebEx, and be able to set up things so that the attorneys can work remotely, can do hearings remotely, can present evidence and the like remotely. And those aren't people who you can kind of just hire from your local travel agency who wanted to get into law and have secretarial skills. Those are people who have a higher level of skill, and particularly from a technical standpoint. So this process of reclassification wasn't complete, and it's not complete now, but one by one and positions by position, these are moving through HR, and they are being approved. We haven't had any not approved. But as they come through, that would add an additional $94,000 to our budget situation. I may as well deal with the Rutland office cost space needs issue. It's only $24,000, which in the context of a $22 million budget is not exactly the biggest issue in the world. But in Rutland right now, we have grown because of the increase in work down there, and we have people who are spread in 3 different areas. There's the staff office we were working in, and at the time when we went in there were 3.5 lawyers and 1.5 secretaries and an investigator. Now there's 6 lawyers, there's 2 full-time staff, and there are 3 IT people that actually don't fit there. So as a result, we had to rent other space in another building down the road a couple hundred yards. And the IT guys are in a basement across in a building across from the courthouse. And then there's a third location that we have been renting for conferences and the like. Meaning like a big enough conference room to have a number of people in it, have them be sufficiently spread apart. The conference room in the Rutland regular staff office is about 12 by 12 with no windows, and it's kind of in the middle was created in the middle of the building. So, and then there's a fourth kind of piece to this that I'll get to as well. So what we've been doing is we're going to get all these people back together where they belong in a bigger space in Rutland. And here's the last piece of this, which is that with all of our IT folks in one spot, we are able, and the way the public defense system is receiving discovery now from law enforcement and from the state's attorneys. We're going to be creating a data hub in Rutland, whose sole job it is to support the offices getting and translating discovery into usable form. It's primarily a one-time expense, but the space is where we have all these IT folks together. All of this is going to go into one place. What was a previously unused building in the front of House Center. And I don't know if you're familiar with Rutland, but House Scale and now House Center was the big commercial industrial complex around the train track area as you go into Rutland. There's a building in front of that is now targeted to be the new public defense office there, and we'll combine all of these people into one office and have sufficient space probably for the next 20 years, if not more. It won't be a space issue that gets us out of there. It'll be if something else happens. So anyway, there is some additional cost ongoing to doing that, but we were able to basically keep the combined rent for that property at about the same level as what our current rent is, but there is upfit cost that needs to be dealt with there, and that's the $24,000 The next, if you go down this kind of list that I've presented, we anticipate, we hope that in fiscal year 23 that we will be doing in-person training as we have in the past, and that there will be some resumption of out-of-state travel. One of the areas that we've not done a good job at least from an in-person standpoint, is dealing with our folks in Mississippi, because we haven't been down there. You effectively can't get in there, and so we've been doing things remotely as best we can. But in the past, we've been going down about every 3 or 4 months. We would send an attorney and an investigator down to deal with the folks who are down there. We're hoping that that will resume in fiscal year 23. We are now in the process of implementing our new case management system beginning in July, and the maintenance and support cost of that is an increase of $133,000 a year. I say 133,000. I hope I did, not $133. Anyway, it's there on the sheet, and there's really no way around that. As a practical matter, that's what these companies are charging. The contract is basically finalized. It's getting ready to be signed, and we are actually fortunate to have one-time formerly ARPA, now court reopening money available to us to assist in the one-time cost, but the 133 is the ongoing maintenance cost. We also have current public defense contract obligations going forward, and some of these I don't always understand what the thought process is, because we negotiate these contracts. If you remember, I do 4-year deals on these big contracts, and the growth over a 5-year period is usually 5%. It's like 2%, 1%, something like that. That is what it is this time. I will tell you. We negotiate them, administration signs off on them, and then I don't know why the money isn't in there to pay for them after everybody knows what's going on, but it's not. So that's the $309,000. There's a little bit left on what's required for our assigned counsel contracts. That's a $64,000. I was hoping, and this was a presentation that I had made, that we would be able to give assigned counsel contractors a 3% increase going forward, and that we would be able to reduce our vacancy savings to a more realistic number than over $400,000. Now, at over $400,000, we are, I'm going to be doing, as I always do, juggling things, not doing things, delaying the implementation of things, looking at particular counties and perhaps eliminating a contract or two until the caseload starts to build up there, and then I will do it again to another county, that sort of thing. But that basically, when something is unfunded that I identify, is just the way we balance things going forward to make sure that we can pay our bills, and that total this year is $995,000, or 96 if you round up. In any event, it's I look at it and I remember where I started with this thing, and I recall one of the very first things I did as Defender General back in 2001 is I went to the House Appropriations Committee, with then Senator, or then Representative Westman chairing the committee. And asked for a $695,000 budget adjustment on a $6.7 million budget. I don't feel particularly bad about saying that we have unfunded needs of $995,000 on a $22 million budget. You know, one way or another, I'm going to end up making it work because that's what I do. But that comes at the expense of the program to some degree in various places around the state. Now, one of the things I did want to draw your attention to, which is this family support project money, the family support workers that we've been doing now for a number of years, and it's been a very successful program. It has won awards. We can identify that it specifically has been instrumental in putting families back together again who got caught up in the juvenile chin system. And some number of years ago, when we were looking at rescissions, I had threatened to cut the family support worker program, which has been funded for $150,000 and not changed really for a number of years now. Representative Hooper did not like my threat apparently and put the money into DCF's budget for the benefit of the Defender General, so that I couldn't get at it and cut it if I had to. Well, I guess it all worked out and the program's still going. But I think it's about time, honestly, to put it back in the Defender General's budget and take it out of DCF's budget. It's a, budget from a year over year, it's a budget neutral proposition. But we did this for, last thing we did was a 4-year memorandum of understanding with DCF, where just it talks about the logistics of transferring it from one to the other. That MOU is expiring this year. And the people who are there are not the same people who were there when it started, and they don't really understand what this is all about. So rather than having to explain all of this and go through the rigmarole, I'd prefer to get that money just back in the Defender General's budget. And I will tell you that I have no plans on eliminating that program at this point, if anybody had a concern about that. That, our budget is not particularly difficult, obviously. This is an AHS that I'm running over here. But it is, we have our issues, and I will say that the biggest issue that we have really now is our ability to hire anybody, and our ability to keep them once we have them hired. We've hired, literally this year, we've hired people around the state who have taken the job for like 2 weeks and then left for $10 more an hour. It's not just Burlington or Montpelier or whatever, it's St. Albans, it's Brattleboro. We just can't hire people and keep them. It's not enough that the state has decent benefits. When Marshall Paul tells me that his daughter is, she's in high school and she's working, making pizzas, and she's getting $20 an hour plus tips. Well, if you can make pizza for $20 an hour plus tips, and I'm trying to hire a support secretary for $15 and something an hour and expect them to be able to handle IT stuff and the like, deal with the Odyssey system, deal with the filing requirements of the court. It's just not going to happen. And that's been our experience. I will also say that, and HR knows this, that we're running into a very similar situation with attorneys. The attorneys who have been with us for a while, who are coming up, closer to retirement, they are getting ready to leave. They're not going anywhere until they're ready, but we have a number of those folks in the next couple of years. We had a few who left this year, but we are in a very unique situation when it comes to hiring lawyers. The Department of Human Resources here in Vermont did a study of blended average entry-level attorney salaries coming out of law school in Vermont with no experience. The lower third of that group had an average starting salary of $83,000. And we're starting right now at 58.9. I have a niece who's got hired, who coming out of law school, hasn't worked a day in her life as a lawyer. She'll be starting at a firm in Boston at $200,000, and she just took it. And if she stays 6 months, she gets a $20,000 signing bonus. That doesn't account for her end of year bonus, which she anticipates being in the $30,000 to $40,000 range, and her regular incremental increase in her salary going into her second year. Now, we never compete with that. We never have. But she didn't she's not like a Harvard Law graduate, first in her class or anything like that. She's a smart woman, and she's went to a decent law school, but it's, middle tier, and she's done well. But the competition for these people, given the shortage of attorneys that is available, is very hot right now. And when I've been literally advertising for 18 months for positions, and I don't even get applicants. Forget about people who would stay. We had one person who came. Actually, I said I'll pay you on our pay scale commensurate with your experience. If you come here from Colorado, came here, looked around, and this was a person who had over 10 years experience doing serious felony work. I couldn't even touch her. I couldn't even come close to meeting what her salary demands were. And she would have been making 20 grand more than I do. It just not feasible. So I think at some point going forward, what I understand also, by the way, is recent literature is telling us that the number of law school applicants this year and people who are taking the LSAT, that number is going down again. So this is going to be a challenge. There are parts of the state where the issue is incredibly acute. In the Northeast Kingdom, for example, is one of the most difficult places to find lawyers and hire anybody. And actually, it's difficult anywhere except for Burlington and Montpelier to find anybody. Burlington, Montpelier, you can find them. Whether you can hire them or not, that's another story. But it's difficult. And just this past week, we've lost a couple of attorneys. One who had been with us for 10 years and moved on, doubled his salary. So, I'm just not. I can't compete, it's just where we're at.
Senator Sears is making a commute back to Bennington this afternoon, and so I'm going to ask, do you have any further questions? I know you'll want to talk to Matt.
If I do, I'll certainly talk to Matt. We spend time offline anyway. I've got his other document. Be in touch.
This document right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't printed it out yet.
Oh, I should have made 2 copies. Do you want me to give you this one?
Sure.
So you got it?
Thank you.
All right.
So if there are any questions, I did put the court reopening plan kind of chart in the materials that I gave you. That number, I guess, is coming out of the House. Appropriations Committee, consistent with what was budgeted previously and is going to be carrying forward. And what we have done is with that is focused all of that money on one-time needs going forward. So, you know, it'll do great things for us during the time when we have it. And when it goes away, we aren't going to be in a position where much, if any, of it will be necessary once it runs out.
Other questions of Defender General? Matt, I only have one comment. I assume you're meeting remotely from home?
Yes.
Oh, well, the room that you're in is spectacular. That's all I can say. The woodwork and the fireplace, it's a wonderful backdrop, if it's real, or maybe you've made it yourself. I don't know.
It is, the room is actually real. I've told Senator Sears this before, but this is one of the rooms in my house, but it's not the room that I'm actually in. So I took a picture of this room and then created a backdrop out of it, and I think it works well, so I use it.
Oh, it does, and the books behind you would make you think you're in your law office. So
That's what I'm trying to do.
other questions? Okay, so what you obviously have here is a budget request beyond what was proposed in the governor's budget, and you've given us the information.
Is that
Oh,
the?
Yeah, let me be clear that this is material that was produced in response to questions specifically from the House Appropriations Committee. And so I wanted to make sure that you had the same information that they had going forward. As I understand it, as it stands right now, the House provided the governor's recommend plus what was put forward in the court reopening plan money, but that's it.
Yeah, that's what Stephanie has told us is their decision. All right, well, now we will understand the pressure that your office is under and your work, and I know Senator Sears is very familiar after all these years. So thank you for the additional information and the requests that you're making. We'll give it careful consideration.
You always do. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll see each other at some point in person. Take care.
So it is now 3:30. And we have Stephanie, do you want to continue? Sure. If we can get through this sheet. I'd like to
Do
finish.
you want to do the substitute amendment on 285?
Oh, yeah, I guess we should. Yes. Does Chrissy have a?
You? Yeah, well, there you
I
go.
do. It's 10:02.
10:02, hasn't changed, right, Stephanie?
Yes, it hasn't. I just would double check because it didn't change after coming from editing.
Thank you.
So this is the $5 million appropriation, and we had an amendment that would basically make a single appropriation to the Agency of Human Services, and it would be under the purview of the Director of Healthcare Reform. Senator Lyons, on behalf of the Health and Welfare Committee, was feeling that kind of put the board in a supplicant position, and our overriding concern is twofold. One of which is the work that the board is supposed to do around global budgeting has to be closely aligned in sequence with what the Agency of Human Services has to do in the waiver negotiation. And the Medicaid waiver is really important to get the Medicare piece incorporated, as well as looking at all the healthcare costs, because if you just focus on hospital costs, those costs can sometimes be managed by offloading costs somewhere else. So you really have to look at it in total. So what we've done here is make the appropriations along the lines that health and welfare wanted, but what they would do to make sure that work is being aligned and sequenced. And Medicaid is really important because under our waiver, we are pushing our budget neutrality cap. And budget neutrality is a requirement that the feds have, and if you exceed that cap, they won't match the money over it. So for years, we've had more capacity than we would ever have general fund to ever draw down. But that day is over. And so from a budgetary perspective, getting our waiver, getting Medicare included, particularly as it relates to some services like, you may have seen apartments that have SASH on it. Well, that Medicare is paying for that service because it's been incorporated into the waiver. So we have to deal with budget neutrality. We want to make sure that Medicare is brought in. We need to make sure that the work is sequenced and aligned well. And so what this does is keep the appropriation so that it's not a single appropriation, but makes it very clear that the work would have to be aligned. The director of healthcare reform in the agency would be reviewing, and there would be agreement in terms of the work, when it's done, et cetera. And because it's still a lot more to be defined, having the work come back, the work plan, with the agreement of both the board and the agency, and then the healthcare reform oversight committee would then make the decision to release money. So it would keep that legislative oversight, but make sure that the work and the sequencing, everybody's on board, that one is not creating disjuncture somewhere else. And it's also recognizing our really important budgetary priority, and that is to renegotiate a waiver that works for us. So this would be a substitute amendment.
Is directing the Green Mountain Care Board to do the study, and who's gonna do
The underlying bill has all this directed to Green Mountain Care Board on the global budgeting in various pieces, and allows them to do analysis. But the money, the bill you passed, the amendment you passed down on Friday had taken the same $5 million and said, I'm gonna put it all under AHS, and only $1 million can go out, and then we'll wait until HROC hears about the plan so that you get the sequencing in order. And you know that by the end of June, we'll know where we're at with the global commitment waiver. We'll be near the end of our all payer model agreement renegotiation that's up in December, and that's where the Medicare piece starts to become clear. And so that's the sequencing piece. The replacement here is, instead of taking the $5 million entirely under AHS, it allows the $1 million to go on Green Mountain Care Board, allows AHS to do its waiver work, but it retains the $3.4 million under Green Mountain Care Board until they come back and get the go-ahead from HROC. That's the change.
And that approval
In the
from
substitute.
HROC will be after we know what the cap is.
After we know what the GC waiver cap is, assuming that we don't get extended again, that we actually get to an agreement. And then we should have some handicap. We won't probably be closed on the all-payer model yet, but we should have some way to understand what the flexibility of Medicare, because they have not been as big a player in the all-payer model as, that's the next natural step, is how Medicare becomes.
So I
More
would suggest you look at page 7, and that is on or before October 1st, the board will provide its plan and timeline to HROC. And if the committee is satisfied the plan and timelines are achievable and appropriately aligned with the work of the Director of Healthcare Reform, the committee then shall authorize to expend the funds. So it allows the legislature to retain. It doesn't do a single appropriation in the way that our amendment did.
Well,
Yes, Senator Westminster.
I'll move this, but I will just say there are a number of pieces within this budget that we're going to deal with, where they're trying to expand stuff under the cap. And so and as we get really close to where the cap is and not knowing what those negotiations are, it is uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Might have ran over it before this is done.
Well, that's why any major expansion of Medicaid coverage has got to be looked at very carefully within what we know about the cap at this point. And the old thing was, oh, well, let's get it under Medicaid. And everybody's organization is saying, well, let's see if this qualifies for Medicaid coverage. We have to be vigilant about that. And this came up with the expansion, adding new peer centers, remember, for mental health, the ELISM programs. It's not the merits of it, it's just whether we're going to have the capacity within our Medicaid funding scheme to support it. And so we need to be very, very careful. And that's why the work, because what Medicaid can bring to the table in an all-payer global budget for hospitals is going to be really controlled by budget neutrality. So that's why, and also the role Medicare is going to play in this as well. So this is, Senator Lyons came in, she's reviewed this revised version and is comfortable with it. So
Much better than the first version,
than our first version.
I think.
Well-
In terms of, I like the additional oversight.
That was there.
The additional,
I thought you were saying the holding the 3.4 back until the,
Well, we did have something to that effect. And
We did have it in the original amendment, we just would, we were allowing AHS to transfer the money to Green Mountain Care. But the main change here, while there's some change, redrafting of it, is the money is actually directly appropriated to Green Mountain Care Board. They don't have to go through AHS to get it. But before both sides had to come to a truck together to get the release.
So So HROC was there in our original amendment, but what this is doing is recognizing work is to be done in two different places. And it's got to be carefully aligned, and a lot of what is having to be done with the waiver is going to help inform what can be done on the global budgets.
so
Is JFO gonna be working on this, or who's gonna be the professional working on this?
Oh,
The money that's in there, assuming they come to a plan that's workable and that HROC agrees, would be to be hiring, the professionals to help them take the next steps on the global budget and value-based payment. But that, you want to make sure that the alignment and those known entities, but the known issues around the waivers are more clear before you can even make that determination.
I should think this would be quite technical.
it is. It's very technical, and developing a global budget, a hospital budget, is complicated. And that's why the language does provide in the bill itself for those to contract with, because we don't have expertise in developing. Now, there is a version on that, and Maryland has been operating a global hospital budget process for a number of years. So this is just to replace our amendment to the bill. And it keeps the 5 million, but it also makes it clear that the work has to be staged, it has to be coordinated, there's got to be sign off. And so it's not, here's my money, I'm going to run. And then it keeps the Health Reform Oversight Committee role intact in terms of review of the plan. and making sure that it's been signed off. Now, obviously, there are people who don't like the, the all-payer model, but they do support global budgeting, and so this does have the two pieces, because the all-payer is the mechanism by which we get Medicare to the table, and that's how we've been able to fund SACH, and there may be some other services as well. And these are for individuals who are particularly duals, who have both coverage under Medicare and Medicaid.
So
the House is aware of this?
So there's in the bill the big bill that's coming over from the House, they have $4 million to the Agreement and Care Board related to value payment. So you're going to be looking at the language from that big bill compared to the language that's in this bill when you're sort of reconciling.
This is, according to Jen Farby, this is much more fleshed out in terms of the work. So what this is just to replace, it's a substitute amendment for the one that we
Quickly put together on Friday.
on Friday afternoon. And so I met with Jen Carby and Senator Lyons this morning, and this was what we agreed would be a path forward to make sure that there was the alignment between the work going in two different places, and not make the board supplicant to, a supplicant to the money, so to speak. And that's really what this does. And then we'll have to reconcile what the House wants to do in terms of what they've got in their bill and what this provides for.
So I hate to beat a dead horse, but I began to go through the DCF budget, and this dips over into Senator Sears, and I mentioned it to you, the Balance and Restorative Justice Program, and that funds a program that serves about 700 youth that are at risk in truant and adjudicated youth. In the governor's budget, they're trying to move that underneath the Medicaid cap too. So, and we got a letter about this that's dated March 10th from all of the restorative justices programs. I just am worried that as we bump up against that cap, and we've got different initiatives all through this, pushing stuff under that cap, it causes me a lot of pause. I think this is a good idea. I support the direction. I'm just worried.
Well, if we don't get a waiver renewal, we're gonna be really worried.
Yeah.
And you get a waiver,
Really
the
serious.
trend, we probably will get a waiver renewal, but understanding what that trend line is
Yeah.
and what that gives us for room when you look out 5 years.
And we're in the place not knowing, and I just.
You don't read across.
This is an example of what I'm talking about, is everybody is saying, how do I leverage Medicaid dollars so I can get more money? And that's why we did not support the mental health peer recovery. That was $1 million, I believe $1 million or two, how much was it?
I can't remember now.
It was
just
more
like
than
five.
that.
It was two, for this very reason. So we are going to have to be very careful about that until we find out what we have for the budget neutrality constraints or parameters within the. Well, just because they ask for it doesn't mean we're going to do it.
Well, and it's in the governor's budget.
Well,
I'm just saying that there's all this pressure.
well, to some extent, one would hope that the governor's budget would have looked at any of those proposals, knowing that we're dealing with a cap problem.
Well,
And we'll have to take some more testimony on that, or get confirmation from the agency that that has been accommodated in their calculations.
Yeah,
I don't know how much Medicaid dollars they're talking about.
Well, presently it's in general fund dollars, $1 million, and they're talking about that they need 2. So they're, part of the thing is they're trying to.
I don't see how that one is anything but an investment. We're already hitting the cap on investments.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just.
I don't see that either.
I just bring it up because I just was sitting here yesterday going through and then,
And what budget is that, DCF?
yes, it's in the DCS budget.
Yeah, well, we have over 100 million, in investments, and they've been ratcheting things.
That's since the last paper, maybe since five years ago.
You know, I just,
Well, you'll have to have, we'll have to have confirmation. That that's gonna come. The same is true when we're giving moving up 7% on the DA's SSAs. That's gonna be the same question.
We got, do you know the names of the DAs that didn't get, got the 3%, or do we need to get all those listed for us?
No, they all
got 3, but some.
No, so they all, the increases have been applied broadly. The baseline for each is slightly, there's a wide range of payments, you know.
yeah, but there are things that are outside of it, like recovery centers are not. And they level funded.
Well, I thought Bobby was talking about just the universe of DAs. Yes, there are other providers outside the universe of DAs and home health and SSAs that are not.
But it seems like every week I get a letter, an email from some group that wants to create an nonprofit organization they've been playing along, but now they want to get organized and hire a person and want some money. And then pretty soon they want 2 people.
Well,
And pretty soon 3. And then pretty soon you got a whole room full or a building full.
well, we're seeing that, and that oftentimes, as somebody said, it seems like if there's a problem, we just want to throw more bureaucracy at it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it and my program is more effective than the one that's already in place or whatever. So it does mean we'll have to just make some decisions about what are those core functions and the extent to which we can expand on them.
I found sometimes in business, if you have a problem, you get rid of some of that help and it straightens itself out because the others all have to be busier. And they
Well,
aren't
I
sitting
think-
around thinking about all the.
I think what we're seeing also is a continued desire to have certain services and benefits that are socialized and across and funded by the state through the budget. But I need to get a motion on the substitute amendment.
I think you have a motion on the table.
I
You
do?
do, I made a motion.
Oh,
to-
okay.
I'll second.
Second.
All right, so do you want to call the roll?
Absolutely. Senator Bell, Senator Bruce, yes. Senator Nitka,
Yes.
Senator Cedar, Senator Starr,
Yes.
Senator West,
Yes.
Senator Kitchen.
Yes. So, let's do a substitute amendment. What are the mechanics of that?
Well, you're the reporter on that one, so I think you have to take the
I
substitute out.
will, you know.
Yeah.
So Christie will send it up to them.
I'll send them a note right now.
You
They
take the
attach
signed one up.
Okay, so the vote was
502.
502. And what time is it now? It's almost 4 o'clock. I'm going to suggest we call it a day and